Good evening and welcome to the Asheville City Council. My name is Esther Manheimer and I'm the Mayor of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you to the January 26th meeting of the Asheville City Council. All council members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through holding these council meetings virtually. To help our audience follow along, I will state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by dialing 855-925-2801 and entering the code 7957. We're also broadcasting live on the city's YouTube channel, Charter Cable Channel 193, and on AT&T Uverse Channel 99. So for those of you out there with us today, welcome. We will take a short recess during tonight's meeting. Well, that's the goal anyway. Hopefully we'll be able to do that. And for public comment, we ask callers to sign up in advance to join the live speaker queue. We will only be taking live comments from those who signed up prior to tonight's meetings. Those callers have been provided instructions on how to participate. Each caller is allotted 3 minutes to speak for each agenda item. We will hear live comments for up to 1 hour for each agenda item. A reminder to callers, you will first hear staff inform council that you're next to speak. Then you'll hear an automated message letting you know you're unmuted and live in the meeting. You may begin speaking after the automated message. To best ensure staff can support you in case of technical difficulties, we ask that you join the queue no later than the beginning of the agenda item before the agenda item on which you have signed up to speak. Additionally, if you have joined the speaker queue and need to disconnect before your time to speak, please hit *4 before hanging up. You can then call back in using the same directions I just shared, and staff will enter you back into the speaker queue of your agenda item. I would like to ask all those participating in tonight's public comment to follow council's rules of decorum. The rules include the following. Speakers are only allowed to speak one time during the public comment period for each agenda item. A person may speak only if they have signed up to speak in accordance with the city's procedures. Speaker substitutions at the meeting are not allowed. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak on an agenda item. In general, each agenda item will have up to a total of 1 hour for public comment. A speaker may not share or relinquish any remaining time they have not used to another speaker. Speakers should not expect council members or city staff to comment on or respond to the speaker's comments during their 3 minutes. I'm going to now go through and introduce the council members and staff leadership on this virtual platform with us today. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Vice Mayor Smith.
Hello.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Hello.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Hello.
Councilwoman Roney.
Hello.
Councilwoman Turner.
Hello.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Good evening.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Hello.
City Attorney Brad Branham.
Good evening.
And City Clerk Maggie Burleson.
Good evening.
Thank you. All right, as usual, we will begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do not have any proclamations tonight, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Council, do any of you have questions or comments regarding the consent agenda, or do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
This is Gwen, so moved.
Renee Squire, second.
Maggie, did you get that? I think Sage seconded it. Okay, I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. We do have one person who has signed up to speak under the consent agenda. They will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Staff, do we have that person on the line?
Mayor, that caller has not joined the speaker queue.
Okay, council members?
Mayor, this is Kimroni. I'm getting alerts that the speaker queue might not be fully functioning at the moment.
Staff, do you guys want to check that out and see if there are any issues you're noticing on our side of things?
Mayor, we're looking into it. Just 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, so what I will need to do then is why don't we go to the presentations, and then we'll come back and vote on the consent agenda, give that person an opportunity to call in, give the staff a second to try to fix the speaker queue. Yes, Kim.
I have a message here that the message that the person is receiving is that the phone comments are not being accepted when entering the code 7957.
Okay, staff, I assume you guys heard that feedback and you're gonna be looking for how to resolve those issues. So let's move on to the manager's report, and I'm gonna turn it over to the city manager, Deborah Campbell, for that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. If you could get the slides pulled up for me, I have a fairly brief presentation to provide for you. The majority of the presentation will be focused on the office, a new Office of Data and Performance Management, or let's see, still waiting on the slides to come up. And Eric Jackson with our Information Technology Services Department will be making that part of the presentation. But while that's coming up, couple of things that we're going to do. One is, as I said, talk about the new Office of Performance, Data and Performance, and we'll also be providing you with information on the positions, if you can go to the next slide, that resulted as a reallocation from the Asheville Police Department related to the reimagining public safety efforts. And then I'll update you on implementation of Reparations Resolution, and also give you some information on an update on the Vance Monument. Next slide, please. So you may recall that approximately $770,000 was reallocated from the Asheville Police Department in consultation with the community in terms of understanding what issues and concerns there were. And we are hoping that these positions will be able to respond to some of those concerns and issues, particularly related to really reassigning some of the responsibilities that the police department once had to some other departments. Really looking at public safety in a holistic way, and looking at our organization as a whole, not just the police, of having responsibility for public safety. So the positions that you can see, I'm not going to go over all of them, but essentially it was 4 from animal control, 1 to our communications and public engagement department, 2 park wardens, 6 telecommunicators, and some salary savings that went to Asheville Public Housing Community and Asheville City Schools. Next slide, please. And so essentially, this one is one that I think, and I don't want to say it is the most important one, but it is a very important one, the Neighborhood Services Specialist position. And I say that because of the role that I think this position will play, particularly to support our efforts related to public safety, but also just the connection and the communication that I feel is needed with community organizations and individuals within our community. So this position will increase community outreach to understand community concerns, collaborate with the community to address and solve problems, and help link individuals and organizations to broader community resources. We're doing good in terms of filling that position. As you all know, those budget actions happen on September the 22nd. And we're now in January, and I believe that that position will be filled by the end of February. We've gone through the interview process, and I believe we feel that we have a very strong candidate, and we had a strong field of candidates that applied for the position. And there's a lot of excitement for having another Brenda Mills in our organization. Next slide. The animal control positions are being transferred or have been transferred from Asheville Police Department to Development Services Department. And we're in the process of also looking at other nuisance-related enforcement like the noise ordinance to also come under this department. Next slide, please. Our Parks and Recreation Department received 2 positions. Essentially, one would be the park warden position that's been transferred from Asheville Police Department to Parks and Recreation. And that position will be principally monitoring Pritchard Park, but also some of the other parks in the community. We also are using one of those positions to partner with Homeward Bound to help us address and deal with some homeless outreach initiative, particularly in downtown, but also in other areas. And that contract with Homeward Bound is in the process of being finalized. Next slide, please. I think you all have heard a lot about our partnership with Buncombe County and Asheville Housing Authority, Asheville City Schools Foundation, Asheville City Schools, and a number of others related to providing broadband access to public housing community sites. You all were actually the leader in terms of starting this fund when you approved your work on September 22nd in terms of the budget process, with $50,000 towards the installation of this effort. Next slide, please. And I also wanted to update you all on, as we said when we started our reimagining, that this phase was only the beginning of our conversations, and that there was lots of evolution and additional conversations that needed to be had based on the input that we got from phase 1. And so we have started phase 2, particularly conversations with hiring the consultants for our next round of engagement. As part of this engagement in terms of the scope of work, we'll be reviewing what we heard in round 1. We'll inform what is being done or has been done as a result of the input, and hopefully some of the information that I just went over is some of the things that have been done, but we certainly know that we need to do much, much more. We'll be seeking community feedback on additional things, services, programs, and partnerships as part of the budget process. And in particular, we'll be looking at that scope in terms of the lens, reviewing those initiatives through a social, racial, economic, and environmental justice lens. Next slide, please. And so now I'd like to introduce Eric Jackson, who's the manager of our newly, I guess, it's relatively new Office of Data and Performance, and with our IT Services Department. I will let him tell you about this new office.
Thank you. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you tonight about the new Office of Data and Performance. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. What I'm going to do is very briefly talk about how we got here, how we're thinking about the work, and a little bit of how we're organizing internally, and how we, kind of turning outward, how we will be communicating with and engaging with the community. Next slide. And you can go into the next. So as Deborah just mentioned, one of the outcomes of the Reimagining Public Safety Initiative was to reallocate $200,000 from APD to establish this new Office of Data and Performance. I am very excited about the opportunity. I think it gives us a chance to take a big step in terms of really advancing the city's efforts to use data to hold ourselves accountable and to improve our ability to deliver on our commitments. At the same time, I think it's important to underscore that this is just the latest step in a fairly long effort of building our capacity to use data, and it's just the first step in what will be an ongoing process of learning. Go ahead to the next slide. So I'm not going to go through this whole history, but I want to point out a couple of things. First, this really has been an effort over nearly a decade. And if you kind of look through this, you'll see that there's an evolution starting from a real focus on the data itself, how we get the data out, how we manage it, and gradually kind of moving over to how do we really make use of that data, whether it be externally for the community to use tools like Simplicity, or internally figuring out ways for us to really use that to manage our own performance and communication internally. Next slide. And the next one. So the way we're looking at this really is our role is to empower others to use data to improve, obviously, accountability, to do a better job of tracking progress toward outcomes and defining those outcomes. But the more I work with this, the more convinced I become that this is central to how we communicate as well. If we can get everybody on the same page about what the goals are, and how we're going to measure our progress toward those goals, it becomes much easier to communicate what's going on. So this is really, our goal is not to create a sort of analytics bureau where people come with questions and we go off and crunch numbers and come back with an answer. It's about helping city staff change how they do what they do. And the initiative that started this summer around reimagining public safety, I think, is an excellent example of changing how we approach how we're doing what we do. So in the past, we might have defined public safety more exclusively using enforcement metrics like crime incident data or calls for service and so on. And while those are really important data sets to incorporate and use, when you define things solely in terms of enforcement-related metrics, you put all the burden on the police, and you tend to blind yourself to some alternative strategies and other partners who can play an important role. And so a better approach is to center on the actual outcomes for the community, to engage the community in defining those outcomes, which is what we've begun doing in the Reimagining Public Safety effort, engaging them in deciding on how we're going to measure, and then grounding our communication in those mutually agreed goals and measures of progress. Next slide. So this is a very busy slide. I'm not going to try and present all of it. I want to kind of highlight 2 points. First, this is not an IT function that we're trying to create. This is a city function. And in order to back that up, we want to make sure that internally we're organizing in a way that is truly cross-departmental. And we're doing that both operationally with representatives, as you see, from a number of different departments, but also for advisory and kind of oversight functions, making sure that we have leadership from departments across the city engaged in helping guide what we do. And the second is that, if we want this to be sustainable, we need to put process behind it. And so thinking about how we formalize defining outcomes, identifying how we're going to measure ourselves against those outcomes, and the discipline of continual improvement, we want to make sure that we're integrating with existing city processes. The premier city process, of course, is the budget, annual budget. And so a big part of our work this year is beginning to find ways to integrate data and performance with budget and equity and community engagement as a unified process. Next slide. And of course, the point of this is that we want to be able to understand the impact of what we're doing, whether that be ongoing services or particular projects or initiatives. When we're trying to improve something, we want to have a disciplined way of establishing our baselines and then measuring progress toward our goals, and in more operational context to have clear benchmarks so that we know when we're falling short and when we need to take action. And over time, really to build our ability to proactively identify issues and respond to them before they become critical. Next slide. Externally, what we want to make sure of is that we all are able to be on the same page in terms of what's happening in our community, what the trends are, and for the community to have really good ways to know what issues have been identified, how we're approaching addressing those issues, and to stay informed over time. And in the case, if it's a pothole that needs to be fixed, that's fairly straightforward. Has it been reported? Is it in the work queue? Is it done? For more complex issues like homelessness or gun violence, where it's a longer time frame and multiple agencies and community groups, to always be able to go in and understand what initiatives the city is undertaking, how it's playing in, and to understand what to expect in terms of timing and progress that we're expecting to make. Next slide. So for communicating externally, we obviously want to build on the transparency tools that we already have. That includes things like the Open Data Portal, our mapping tools like Simplicity. More recently, we've been experimenting with building dashboards. The Equity and Inclusion Department launched their dashboard at the beginning of September. 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Police Department launched their new Police Transparency Dashboard. And we're really thinking of these at this stage as experiments. We're learning as we go, but working toward finding some good standard ways that as a city, we can be communicating using data about what's going on, what our goals are, and what progress we're making. We obviously need the communication to go in both directions. So one of the best ways to do that from a data and performance standpoint is to involve the community in defining what the outcomes are. Again, as we've begun doing in our Reimagining Public Safety initiative, and also helping us determine how we're going to measure progress toward those goals. What we use is a framework called results-based accountability, often referred to as RBA. That's at the foundation of our racial equity toolkit, but also being used generally within the city. It's a structured process for thinking through defining outcomes, defining how we're going to measure progress, and having a disciplined way of working through our improvement cycle as we learn and go forward. And finally, we really want to start, as we staff up, to build more direct relationships between the office and the community, particularly community groups that may be neighborhood-based or more issue-based. At this point, we've launched a news and announcements email list, but as we have staff, we'll start showing up in neighborhood meetings and reaching out to other organizations. Next slide. That is a lot. And so what we're going to be focused on this year is obviously building out our core staff. I'm hoping that we're in the middle of interviews. I'm hoping that will also be done by the end of February. And continuing to build out our internal training program and building our internal community of practice. Externally, our big focus areas, as I said, are integrating with the budget process, focusing particularly on those projects that are associated with advancing racial equity in Asheville initiative, and building relationships in the community so that we can use those relationships to continue to learn how best to communicate outward and also to receive information from the community, excuse me. And I'm happy to answer any questions. or turn it back over to the city manager.
I have some questions when it's the right time. Deborah, will you let me know?
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you. So this is Kim. So it stuck with me from your presentation that we tend to blind ourselves. And so this isn't specifically about the presentation so much as like where we go next. And to get in right relationship with each other for our community health and well-being, our organization is going to have to acknowledge the harm that's been caused by the city of Asheville on the journey to get to where we are now, so we can get where we need to go. Reimagining isn't going to work if we're only going to continue to imagine how our organization continues to hold the most power and resources. An authentic effort might look like inviting a shared vision with meaningful action in a way that welcomes participation and resource mapping. I've heard and agree that this might look like participatory budgeting program, funding engagement ambassadors, and investment in neighborhood plans. So my questions are we going to get out of our own way so our community partners have space, time, and resources to realize a city we all want to live in? Where is our potential for contracting outside of our organization? And are we going to build trust by offering trust? And I'm not expecting answers to those questions tonight. I just think they have to be on the table because of the urgent request from our community.
Thank you. I'm sorry that the presentation was taken down. Can you bring that back up? We have just one more slide.
Well, I just, Kim, if you wouldn't mind, maybe emailing us the statement you just said, because I'd like to read it again, because and so that for a later date, that would be helpful to me if you could do it. Thank you.
And this is definitely something that we're going to need going into our retreat, because just as I was feeling it felt like in an abusive relationship, the person who was writing how you move forward in a healthy relationship was the person who was doing the abusing. It didn't ring, like, even though I felt like that we had potential, I don't hear the support for it. So I know we need more conversations. So I'll happily send it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that, Kim, because I would like to hear what specifically the concern that you have and whether it rests in any of the particular positions or approaches or things that we just presented. Or are you looking overall? But as you said, we'll have more time to discuss that, and looking forward to those discussions and hopefully following up. And if we aren't headed in the right direction, we want to know that. And so the last subject matter that I'll talk about and provide an update is the Reparations Resolution. And I'll also talk a little bit about the Vance Monument discussion. I know that reparations is an extremely important issue for our community, and I know that there are a lot of people who are frustrated that we haven't moved as fast as some might think, but there have been things that have been underway, and it's been mostly at a staff level with city and county staff meeting and talking and brainstorming about the process, because particularly for the city's resolution, it directed the city manager to provide a process for looking at short and medium and long-term strategies to help build generational wealth or looking at this issue. It also tasks the city manager with helping to create a reparations commission to look further into an initiative or a process forward. What we have been doing essentially again is talking and brainstorming and actually reaching out to other communities. Like we just had a fairly lengthy conversation with staff from Evanston, Illinois, who in 2019, they also passed, their elected officials passed a resolution around reparations. We were intently listening to their lessons learned, the approach that they took, and progress that they have made. We're also looking to meet with other technical experts like authors that have written books around the subject matter of reparations, meeting and discussing with Professor William Darity Jr., I think, who is probably the most renowned expert, particularly in North Carolina and in the South, around this issue. So we feel fairly confident that we can bring a recommendation back to you in late February around a process and potentially a recommendation for a structure of the Reparations Commission and what that a potential charge that commission would have, obviously consistent with the resolution that was adopted by elected officials. So I'll go to the Vance Monument. I believe that at the meeting that you all had when you received the recommendations from there were some specific directives that you gave of staff before you were to finalize your decision. There was a recommendation to remove the monument by the task force, but you said in order to finalize that decision, you wanted us to bring you back some information. And so what we are in the process of doing is collecting bids and information about the costs to remove the obelisk in its entirety. If or when you all make that decision in terms of to remove it, you asked us to think about some options for a potential temporary use while we are in the process of developing a much longer term permanent reuse of that site. And so staff is in the process of collecting all of that information. We will bring that information, all of it, back to you all so that you have a comprehensive amount of information to make and base your decision. We hope that we can get that information back to you by March. And then lastly, in terms of the task force's work, they will be completed with the Vance Monument Task Force. They will be completed with their work in February. They will provide you all with a document that kind of summarizes their work and their recommendations in totality. With that, I will stop and see if there are any additional questions.
Any questions, council? Go ahead, Kim.
I just have one. I want to clarify that we're not even going to get to the next point of a decision until March at the soonest.
Ms. Ronnie, in terms of the timing of us collecting all of the information, if you all decide that you don't need all of that information, that would be a decision that you all would need to make. But I think you all said bring back all of the information in its totality.
I would like to say I greatly appreciate you laying out the way the procedure would continue. I think it's important that we not only address the cost of removal, but we also must address the cost of replacement. What will go in its place and how much will it cost? Already we've taken on the pit, which is right downtown. I think the estimate to redo that or some kind of plan is somewhere between 13 and 14 million. So if you look at the cost to actually redo this park area, you're still looking at millions. Even if you're looking at half, you're still up to about 20, 21 million or more. And then with all these costs that we have, the city, it's our responsibility to be fiscally responsible. So we need to take on things that we need to take on, especially in light of the climate that we find ourselves in now. We must be the adults in the room and take on the responsibilities for the city that we know that are things that we need to take on. I mean, there's no need to add additional cost or expenses on our plate when it's not necessary. So I think that I'm really happy to hear that Deb is going to actually research replacement cost and things of that nature, because that's something we need to look at. This money, I'm quite sure, if you went to the community and said, hey, look, reparations is the big issue. These are the things that we're concerned about. The monies that you could actually allocate toward those different things could be used toward reparation. We wouldn't be having this conversation. I think that we need to sort of look at the things that are important, the things that we're going to benefit from, rather than things that we like to see. So if you're really concerned about the community and the community's needs, then we need to make more prudent decisions when making decisions that can impact the whole community. I won't take the time now, but if I could, I would like to read something to council. I'd like to ask the mayor for permission to share an article that I've written that I'd like to share with the other people that are viewing us right now. And the reason why is because I guess I get somewhat offended when other people sort of dictate how people should feel and and making decisions for the Black community through orchestrated events or efforts. I take offense with that. I think that Blacks in the community, we can make our own decisions. We don't need, how can I say this? We don't need efforts of people that do not understand what our plight is, or what our movement is, or what our needs are. So I'll just take this opportunity right now. You can tell I get real emotional with this, but I'm just going to read an article that I just actually finished to sort of give people an insight as how and why I feel the way I do about the Vance Monument. And there's so many benefits that it could have to the community because we're not thinking out the box, that we could sort of pass up. First of all, what I'd like to say is this. The title is, Can Repurposing the Vance Monument Help Heal the Divide in Asheville? The first recorded obelisk dates back to the 11th century BC, and that's to the ancient Egyptians. They symbolize the sun gods. That makes this architectural form 13,000 years old. It is a symbol and concept of duality and balance. The obelisks are thought to represent good energy and dispel negative forces. These works of art, and that's what they are, works of art, they're known all over the world. And we got a chance to see that during the inaugural, basically the Washington Monument. And then you have the Washington Monument in Washington. And then you have the needle, Cleopatra's Needle, which is what they call it, which is in Central Park in New York. And then you have the monument in Philadelphia. These monuments will always have a place in history, so they will always be there. Asheville's obelisk itself does not represent a confederacy. The symbol is over 13,000 years old. The Confederacy has only been around about 150 years. So many of the Confederate statues that we talked about that were removed during the George Floyd, situation or whatever, those were Confederate. Most of them were Confederate monuments. They were not standalone obelisks. Asheville is known for its art, and the Vance Monument represents one of the oldest art statues in downtown Asheville. Many people in the community have strong feelings about our ancestors being sold in public places, like Pack Square or whatever. But truth be told, our ancestors were sold and killed in many public places as well as many barns all throughout the whole country. So do we hide our truth, or do we embrace it and use it as a reference to become stronger? Reclaiming the monument. An alternative is to reclaim the monument, recapturing its positive and inspirational meaning. Over 150 years ago, the Confederacy attached itself to positive symbols because they wanted to give their movement relevance. Another symbol that they attached themselves to was a cross, a symbol that is still being used today by white nationalists and supremacists to intimidate. For decades, our ancestors had to bear witness to the burning crosses left at their properties, destruction, public lynchings, and murders of all sorts. So what do we do with the cross? Do we just tear it down everywhere we see it because it's a Confederate symbol, because they named it a Confederate symbol? Is that what we do? So removing the monument is an emotional and reactionary response, providing an apparently easy answer to a complicated issue. We need to be mindful how we show up. The African American community is on the radar, and decisions that we make here in this community can affect other communities. The one thing about Asheville, we are very fortunate to have a very liberal people here in Asheville. And for that reason, we are able to get a lot of things done. And I think that what we really need to do is work with that rather than cause issues where there are no issues. Okay, and we cannot avoid the hidden phantom side effects of our descendants. We cannot avoid or hide the phantom side effects of the desecration of the monument held so dear by so many. And those side effects fall squarely on the backs of the Blacks, just like many lashes from the past. They are hidden scars beneath the civil courtesies and the liberal ideas, while the shirts we wear hide the scars and the bloodstains. And for example, when Blacks have to go and get a rental unit, or a family tries to rent a house from a landlord or whatever, and you may not think it, but we know that just certain actions that we take will influence that, whether or not they lease that home to that Black family, or whether or not that employee hires the well-qualified employee, or whether you're able to are you being overlooked for a job or whatever. But all these things that I'm talking about now, these are things that subliminally affect the Black community by actions we take. And so let's also address at this time the well-intentioned people who fervently support the actions of removing the monument, yet they never experience the consequences that we have to face. The Vance Monument Task Force was commissioned by the Asheville City Council and the Buncombe County Board of Commissions to consider removing the monument, born out of a group call during the George Floyd protests. But African Americans are not a monolith. Just because a group takes a stand on an issue does not mean it's a decision or a consensus of the entire Black community. And the reason I say that too is this. The one thing I notice is this. Many in the community, the Black community, in doing real estate, I've noticed that they don't use emails. A lot of them don't use social media. So why are we allowing these things like this to actually make decisions for us? I think if we really want to get a pure consensus of what the Black people really feel, we need to take the time to go out and get in the community and speak to the people, speak to the churches, see what they want. But do not remove a monument saying that this is what the blacks want and expect us to be okay with it just because she put a task force together that basically pretty much outlined what their mission was. Okay, and my father once told me that a lot of blacks died building the monument. I don't have any proof of that. That was what he told us as a child. And so he would not let us visit the Biltmore, the Biltmore House. He would not let us visit the Biltmore House for that reason. And the one thing about that is this: you can pretty much pretty much make the decision that if blacks were building the Biltmore House and YMI, they pretty much built the obelisk. So the obelisk, when it was built, basically, you think it was built by our people, okay? And when it was actually, in 2015, when they were restructuring and resurfacing it, they found the time capsule underneath it. And that was the first time I felt proud about anything. And the reason I felt proud, because it gave us a piece of history of Asheville that was ours, and that one of our ancestors, we don't really know the history, whether it was included, because of inclusiveness, someone included in there, or we don't know, it could have just been someone that was tasked to put it there, who decided to go ahead and put the newspaper in to let us know that our ancestors were there. Regardless of what the reason is, that to me is history. So as I think that what would be a very fitting thing for us to do is use the monument as a history. Because one thing about history is this: history will not change. You can't erase history. So I would like to say that what we could do is use the monument to, Okay, what I'd like to see done is Asheville's history could be told full circle as we address the stains of slavery and the impact of the urban renewal and institutional racism in the once robust Black community. Lifting the monument up and using the power of the obelisk could provide a new narrative and unite us all to create the desired result of unification, equity, and inclusion. The obelisk would provide a platform to begin to have those difficult conversations that could bring us together. Asheville as a city has acknowledged our dark past and chosen not to ignore it, those injustices and crimes against humanity. Rather than honoring the perpetrators of those crimes, we could honor our ancestors whose memories would otherwise have been lost. It will be a great opportunity to educate our visitors as well as our local community. We could call it the Unity Tower that is located in Freedom Park. We could create a legacy that will be a centerpiece for our growing city. We could offer a positive roadmap for other cities all over the country that are dealing with similar issues. The Reverend Martin Luther King inspired the human race to strive for harmony. He realized that no man, woman, or child is truly free until we're all free. And during the Martin Luther King event, Brian Stevens, who actually was the writer for Just Mercy, he spoke at the event. And he talked about the importance of us remembering our history. Because if you don't remember your history, then guess what? You're doomed to repeat it. And that's one thing I'm saying here. People say the monument, it hurts us, and pretty much when I look at all the comments coming in from people, get rid of it. It's ugly. It's Confederate. It's this and that. It's history, and it's our history. And we have to build on that, and we have to accept that, because that will make us stronger. That will make us stronger. So that's pretty much all I'd like to say. I really think that we really should consider taking the time to get out in the Black community to see what we need and what we want, as opposed to our conversations and narratives being hijacked by others who think they know what we need. Thank you.
Mayor, that was all that I had for my update in terms of the manager's report. But again, I'll be more than happy to answer any other questions if you have any.
Council, as the manager explained, in terms of the process for this, for the Vance Monument, we would next see this on our agenda, likely the first meeting in March, when the bids will come back in on the cost of removal and the other items that are going to be explored. And also the task force will have officially finalized their report, which did include some other things beyond just recommending whether to remove the Vance Monument. That will be done in February. So I say that to say that this item will come back before us for a vote and of course discussion and public comment. But I know that Councilwoman Kilgore made a statement tonight, and I appreciate that. And so if anybody else, would like to address this tonight, I don't want to cut off anyone else's opportunity to do that. I just want to make sure for those listening how this is supposed to work from just a process standpoint. We have already voted once in a 6-1 vote to accept the recommendation from the task force for removal, but that, as the manager has pointed out, wasn't officially the vote to authorize a contract to spend money on the removal. So that will have to be considered at a later meeting. So council members, is there anyone who would like to address this issue before we go back to voting on the consent agenda? The phone lines are now fixed, so we're going to be able to do that. Okay. All right, council, we had a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. We had one person signed up to speak. Last I heard, that person was still not on the line and staff had reached out to them. Yes, but they're not on the line. Okay, but they are not on the line. Staff has called them and texted them and emailed them, and they are not on the line. So we're going to move ahead and vote on the motion and second to approve the consent agenda. And as with all voting during virtual meetings, we will do this by roll call vote. So when I call your name, please tell me aye or nay in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Okay, so that concludes the consent agenda. We've already done the first presentation, which is the manager's report. I asked to have an additional item under presentations added. It's listed as Asheville School Board Member Selection, Legislative Process and Information. And it's really more accurate to say that this, the topic that I intended here was just to talk informally with you all about the process we use for requesting legislation from the state. This came up in the context of the school board because, as you know, we are embarking on taking applications, and soon we will be voting to appoint new school board members to the Asheville City School Board. And the question periodically comes up about whether or not we should move from an appointed school board to an elected school board. And the process for doing that, if we were to make that request, would be that we, or frankly anyone, could ask the legislature to please introduce a bill at the legislature that would change our school board from an appointed school board to an elected school board. So that made me think about what just at this point of the year, this is kind of when we would talk about a legislative agenda. So a lot of cities actually put on their city council agenda to consider a legislative agenda, and they put together a list of things they'd like to ask the legislature to consider. We have done that in the past. We have even gone so far as to do what a lot of cities do, which is kind of hold a breakfast or a lunch with our legislative delegation and hear from them about the upcoming session. And we talk to them about what we'd like to see at the upcoming session. I will tell you that due to political differences in the last several years, it has been quite a rocky relationship, as you know, between us and the legislature. And that dynamic has changed quite a bit from us asking for legislation to us trying to fend off terrible legislation. So I think we're, the waters are a little bit calmer, I hope. I hope I'm not jinxing us by making that prediction. But this does bring up the question of whether or not the council would like to consider any kind of a legislative agenda for this session. We don't have a lot of time because the legislature just got sworn in, and the legislative, the bill filing deadlines are fast approaching. So they are approximately around the end of February, early March. It is not impossible to get a bill after that date because you can gut a sitting bill and add something to it. But in terms of the timeline, it is best because the legislators have to make the request to the bill drafting division to draft the bills and get them ready for them. So, and they have deadlines to do that. So a couple of things. One is this question around whether or not we would like to make a request this year for an elected school board bill. There also, as you know, there has been a pretty lengthy conversation in the last couple of years around changes to the Tourism Development Authority's room tax allocation. That work actually continues to happen, and I've been in communications with our new state senator, Julie Mayfield, former city council member, which is a great conduit for us to have at the legislature to help us with this. And she is keeping her eye on that and is engaged in those communications. Some other things that we've considered in the past include whether or not to continue to request that cities be authorized to have option for a referendum to create a transit tax through sales tax. This is something that's allowed in North Carolina only on a countywide basis and not a citywide basis. So a lot of cities have talked about asking the legislature to create that opportunity for cities to put on the ballot a question about raising sales tax for transit funding. So these are just a few of the things. Now, this is a presentation. We're not voting on anything now. I'm just a little bit panicked because our time is so short. And so I just want to, I just kind of want to know if there's some interest in this, and the one burning one, I would say, that we would need to make a decision around sooner rather than later would be the question around the school board. This, I mean, obviously a lot of you just were running for office. This came up, it comes up. I know there is some interest in having a joint city council, school board, and possibly county commissioner meeting with all three bodies, where we would, top of the list, talk about this issue. And I don't know how quickly that could get scheduled, but that could be one way for us to have a community conversation around this question. So just tell me, any thoughts about this?
I think having a community conversation, especially around the elected school board, is the best route to go. Any other route would be very irresponsible.
Okay. If your little box lights up, I'm assuming you want to say something. So Sage?
I agree with community conversation. I'm worried about the time because I am interested in looking into a possible bill. Same with thank you for bringing up the lodging tax, and I think that one also is important. So I'm interested in engaging.
Okay.
I'd also agree with Shanika and Sage about the community engagement. I will just go ahead and say I've received several calls from organized groups, individuals in the Black community who are outraged that this is under consideration. Many see it as a political power play designed at limiting the Black voice in the public schools.
If you go to an elected school board, is what you're saying.
That's been the general
Yeah.
consensus, not 100%, but the general consensus.
I have heard that in the last many years. Yes. Yes.
Mayor, yeah, if I may, I have been introduced to this as a reoccurring issue, and what would help me is to understand, and I don't mean right now, but as a part of that community conversation, to understand why it is for 20 years this conversation has gone back and forth for the very reasons that Councilwoman Mosley has mentioned. I hear it has come up time and time again, so background would help me.
May I add something before you speak? I did have the opportunity, Mayor, to speak with someone who is an expert in the field. And he emphasized that prudence is important and indicated that the first thing we need to consider or to find out, and I don't know if you know, because Asheville is unique in the way we appoint in North Carolina, but certainly not unique throughout the country, what the stated purpose for doing it this way was, for fear that changing it might in fact perpetuate unequitable results as it relates to our children. More specifically, he said to me that changing whether a school board is appointed or elected would not have bearing on the achievement gap. And he said he had data to prove it and all that other kind of stuff. So he said the first thing we need to ask ourselves is why we do it this way in the first place.
Okay, well, I think, so in terms of timing, we can, I think we can have, what we've done before is bring this through governance. So I think we can, our governance subcommittee, I think we can do that at before the first meeting in February. I think that'll work for any other legislation we want to consider putting on a legislative agenda. It will not work for the school board piece because that will require us to have this meeting first with the school board and with the county commission in a joint meeting. So I think the only way to manage that is to request that staff start working on trying to schedule that meeting. And I think, Gwen, if you could, as the liaison to the school board, let them know that we're interested in having this joint meeting, and we do want to discuss this topic. And I'll reach out to Brownie Newman, the chair of the county commission, and let him know as well. So we do have this very strange intertwined school system governance where city council is appointing the school board members, but the county commissioners are actually tasked with managing their capital needs, building schools in the Asheville city school system and helping to maintain them. So it's a very intertwined relationship that will really require all of us to come together. And I think that's a good idea. We have done this before between the council and the school board, and it's been a good history of meetings there, but we haven't also added the county commissioners, so we'll see if they're willing to participate as well.
Okay. Esther, the chair and the superintendent do know that we would like that three-way meeting. It was primarily around the primary school discussion, but I don't think this will surprise them. I will make them aware, and then the superintendent was certainly open to it.
Okay. And we do, in the past when we've met with them, we kind of flesh out an agenda that covers a few things. So we know now we want to talk about the primary school. We want to talk about elected versus appointed school boards. We'll see if there's any other topics that bubble up. I do think the county is very interested in talking about capital needs. They may want to put that on the agenda. So
I'll also add, this is Kim speaking, that I've submitted a 3.5-page list of questions to this group, which I'll submit to the county as well, asking for that group meeting, because we do have to talk about our facilities if we're going to be talking about supporting early childhood education and pre-K services countywide. We are in the county, so I think we're going to want to see some of those connections, how early childhood education impacts opportunity throughout K through 12, but also just we have a lot of community partners that we're going to need to engage if we're going to realize success around our education system for our children. Having worked with children who are graduating this year that I've known since kindergarten, I think it would be a cause for celebration for our whole community if we can get right and get on the same page of music.
And I think it would be nice if, to that end, if the county could share with us their vision around access to quality, affordable pre-K for all preschoolers in Buncombe County, which is one of their stated goals. And they've been working on that and have looked at a lot of data around that. And, quite frankly, we're sort of having these discussions in our own little silos. So this is a good opportunity to cross-pollinate and hear a lot of what they're working on and vice versa. So that would be good. Okay, so it's a big lift and not that much time. I can see eyes rolling in here, but yes, we're gonna work on getting that scheduled. But we can do it. Eager to get to work. Yes.
May I ask a question, just clarifying? I'm receiving emails about school board applicants. So when do we, regardless of this process, we need to make some appointments soon, right? What meeting is that?
March, I believe it's March. Is it Vice Mayor?
We have to make a decision before March 2nd. They sent over the agenda yesterday. I'll get the timeline to everybody, but our next meeting, February 9th, we'll make the decision on whether to do the essays and the interviews. That'll be at the, yeah. And then after that, it kind of depends on what happens after our February 9th meeting, how the timeline goes. But I'll give you a general idea of how the timeline will go and what our benchmarks are.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and I appreciate your efforts on collaboration there.
And just something to note about, I am not advocating for or against an elected school board, but just from a logistics standpoint, you would see, if you did see legislation, it would not be applicable and probably until the next even year election, which would be 2022. And also note that the Asheville City school district is only about 40-some thousand of the population of the city of Asheville. So, and Asheville, of course, is well over 90,000 people. So it's not even the entire city that would, there's a lot of logistics there to figure all that out. So it would take some time before you implemented anything like that, if you were to even do it.
Right, because I don't even think the city schools are arranged around precincts. So it would be kind of complicated. You're going to have, so a little complicated.
Okay, I just got a message from Sarah. The appointments should be made by March 23rd.
And that's for the 3 vacancies.
Yeah.
Coming up. Yep.
Well, they'll decide on the process on February 9th.
Okay, thank you, Council. That, unless there's any other comments, that concludes the presentations. We do not have any public hearings tonight, but we have a whole bunch of unfinished business. So just to remind everyone how this worked, because of the virtual meeting format and the special legislation that applies to all cities during this period of time during the pandemic with the virtual meeting format, we had the public hearing on each of these items at the last meeting, and then we vote on them at this meeting, but we don't take further public comment. So, Council, if you'll begin with me, we're going to run through these. So the first item of unfinished business is a vote to permanently close a portion of right-of-way known as Velvet Street. Can I get a motion and a second to permanently close a portion of right-of-way known as Velvet Street? Sage is moving.
I'll second.
And Antoinette has seconded that. All right. Anyone have any comments about this before I do the roll call vote? Okay. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And me, aye. Okay, next unfinished business, item B, is a vote to permanently close a portion of right-of-way at the intersection of Cortland and Houston. Can I get a motion and a second to permanently close a portion of right-of-way at the intersection of Cortland and Houston?
I'll move. This is Sage.
I'll second.
Okay, that was Sandra seconding.
Yes.
Okay, I have a motion and second, so I'm going to take another roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. The next item, unfinished business, item C, we were to vote to permanently close an unopened right-of-way known as Trade Street. However, staff has pulled this from consideration because there's a discrepancy in the property description, so it's not ready for us to vote on tonight. So that one will move us to unfinished business, item D. This is where I need a motion and a second to conditionally zone 32.2 acres of property located at 99999 Sand Hill Road from a commercial industrial district to commercial expansion conditional zone for an approximately 130,000 square foot warehouse and distribution facility and surface parking and vehicle storage areas, along with a change in the future land use map from urban center to employment/anchor institution center. So I'm asking you for a motion, but would you first like to hear from staff about a couple of the tweaks that happened to the B1 conditions? Tweaks, I say, a couple of additions. Yes, nodding. Okay, I think Shannon Tuck is on here, might be able to. Whoa, okay. You can tell us maybe a little bit about any changes that occurred from the public hearing at our last meeting to tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. There's really only been one change, and in the updated list of B1 conditions that was shared with council, it's condition number 13, and that is an addition regarding the applicant's practice or commitment to their practice of expanding opportunities to minority, small, and women-owned enterprises as part of their hiring practices. And so that's been added to the list of B1 conditions at the applicant's request.
Council, do you have any questions for staff or the applicant before I have a motion to, I don't want to say it all over again, but to approve this conditional zoning application? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the conditional zoning application?
So moved.
Okay, Sandra moved, and I saw Antoinette, you raised your hand, second?
Second.
Okay. All right, I have a motion and a second. I'm going to do a roll call vote.
Before we do that, can we have questions or comments?
Yes, oh, please, I'm sorry, yes.
So this is Kim. So looking at the available land that we have in corridors where we can have like a lot of traffic, like, I don't know, 700 minivans, then I have to look at like the long-term goals and not just like the short-term benefits. And I really felt like we scraped the barrel on how this was like in line with our stated goals and how it was going to get us there for just $130,000 in taxes. So it smells a little bit like what's happening at the county with the conversation about Raytheon, where it's like, do we take the money now? What is the long-term side effect? And for that reason, I don't see how this conditional zoning gets us to our stated goals, which is why I'll be voting no. But I do have gratitude for the community agreements that our council members have worked on for more minority and women-owned business efforts.
And I'm sorry, and anyone else who has a question or comment before we vote? Okay. All right, I'm going to do the roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
No.
Councilwoman Turner.
No.
And Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Okay. All right, I believe our last item of unfinished business is a vote to adopt a resolution approving and adopting the Civil Service Board substantive rules. Council, again, we had a lot of discussion about this one, and I just want to know, does anyone have any questions before we entertain a motion to adopt a resolution approving the Civil Service Board substantive rules? Okay, if
I don't have
not,
a question so much as a comment.
Yes.
To go ahead and get out of the way now.
sure,
What we need is the opportunity to have accountability from the community. This doesn't get us there. I am still worried that we had community partners at the table with the NAACP and I think it was the Southern Justice Law Center in the conversation about what we needed to do next with our Civil Service Board, and we don't have that yet. Acknowledging that this is like the best we can do with a bad situation. I still have concerns about why we would then add a rule that's not congruent with every city in the state around the 1 year limit to like how long you can be, I'm not thinking of the right words right now, in probationary period. Which is why I'll be voting no on this, though I know, like I said, I know we're taking from a terrible situation to a less terrible situation on the pathway to get what we actually need, which is Citizen Review Board.
Okay, Council, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna make the motion to,
Please,
I'm
yes.
sorry, I'll make the motion to adopt the Civil Service Board substantive rules.
Sage, you might be seconding, but you're muted. Okay, do I have a second? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Okay, did you want to say a comment before we do a roll call vote? Anyone? Okay, Vice Mayor Smith.
Nay.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Nay.
Councilwoman Roney.
No.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
And Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Whoa, bit of controversial vote there. Okay, 4-3, it passes. I want to thank staff for all the work they did on that one. I know it has been a lot of work, and I do think that our new council really weighed in terms of the process I'd like to see around Civil Service Board rulemaking, among other things. And so that's helpful and a learning experience. Okay, council, we have completed the unfinished business. We have no new business. We do have several people signed up to speak under the informal discussion and public comment portion of our agenda, which is the final portion of our agenda. We do not have a closed session tonight, correct, Brad? I believe we do not have a closed session tonight.
No closed session, Mayor.
And we have a lot of folks that signed up to speak concerning, in particular, the Vance Monument. Hopefully, most were able to hear the earlier lengthy discussion about the Vance Monument to help inform their comments this evening. But unless anyone has any comments, and of course you have an opportunity at the end, but I'm going to begin the informal discussion, open public comment portion of the agenda. We're good? Okay, staff, we are ready to move into that portion of the agenda. I'll turn it over to you all.
Yes, hello, Councilwoman, can you hear me?
Yes, they can hear you. Thank you so much, Carol.
Oh, thank you so much for your time and attention. You're adorable. Good evening, Councilwomen. My name is Carol Whittemore. I'm a native of this area. I live in Swannanoa, and I was born in Asheville, and I work downtown full time. And I would like to talk to you just for a few minutes about some things that have happened while I have been downtown, and I appreciate your time and attention. Last Friday, I was going home from where I work as a pre-K teacher downtown, and I was 2 vehicles back. There was a large white truck, a black truck, a trailer, and me. And there were some people demonstrating at the Vance Monument. It was about 5:10, and this truck was illegally geared with a big steel pipe on the front, to let out gas on the people who were the social democrats that were protesting there. Well, it went in my car. And by the time I got to 240, I was dizzy, my head hurt, and I felt nauseous. I called the APD right away, okay? And since then, I've been trying to find out, who this person is. Because as it turns out, a lot of people have seen them. And there's been a lot of this big truck aggression business going on downtown. And I was an unintended victim. It was very egregious to me. And anyway, I wanted a chance to share that with folks that I knew that had the power to make something happen. And obviously, we've got, a lot of energy going on down there, a lot of freedom of speech, a lot of freedom of free, whatever. There's a lot of stuff going down. And anyway, there was another incident that happened to me that I did report to the police. I ended up calling the police on January the 6th. I was taking a walk at 12:30 p.m. downtown in my normal area. There was this big blaring speaker going. Some people, had "Don't Tread on Me," American. I'm very friendly. That's just who I am. So whenever, hey, what are y'all doing? So before I knew it, this woman was in front of my face, 4 inches away, no mask, with a "Don't Tread on Me" flag. Geez Louise. And I'm like backing up and saying, you can't get away from me. You don't have a mask on. And she's telling me, quote unquote, "You need to be quiet. I'm listening to my president." Well, I moved away from her and called the police and went back to work. But we all know what happened later that day. But I do have sort of an algorithmic brain, and I am 59. I mean, they had day jobs. So I really actually didn't think she was going to hit me with the flag, but I wasn't sure. But it didn't make me feel very good. And before the election, there were other things that drugs that encountered going around. Well, thank you very much. Okay, I think that means I have about a minute, but I wanted to say I think we need something called Asheville Ambassadors. Somehow we'll work with many communities.
All right, council, we're going to go back to Nina. Nina, I'm going to open your line. You won't hear the prompt. Nina, your line is now open.
I can start speaking now?
Yes, council can hear you.
And I'm being heard by council. Okay. My name is Nina Accardo. I live in East Asheville. I'm next to Sonic on 1001 Tunnel Road, Highway 70. It's the cut through to the Nature Center. I sent an email out to council with an invitation to come and look at our street, and mostly behind the Sonic dumpster and along the small portion of the sidewalk. And note that there's storm drains on either side of the dumpster. The Sonic trash is coming down from the dumpster on private property. The issue is their fence is code. It doesn't come down to the ground. It doesn't have to. All of the other businesses in our area go down to the ground. Their trash blows down, and sanitation refuses to cite them or hasn't even given them any fine. And I believe that if they had to spend money, they might just be willing to fix their fence so the trash doesn't blow down. I was asked by sanitation to add complaints about other people on our property, who own property in the neighborhood. What I want is the property owners to be aware that there's a problem and that they're responsible to pick up litter and trash on their property. It's not my responsibility to organize a cleanup. I manage to clean my property. Even if there was a cleanup, I doubt Sonic would participate. And what are the people supposed to do? Come and pick up the trash that also blows from there onto their property and clean the hill for them. I want something that's sustainable. And I tried contacting the neighborhood coordinator, and that didn't go anywhere. And I thought that maybe that coordinator could help with the problem in our area. And my question is, if the trash that is acceptable in my neighborhood would be on your property or would be on the property owner's front yard, I bet it wouldn't be acceptable. And so I don't understand why Brad Hunter is telling me that it is acceptable. And I wish that you would come on my street and let me know. And if I don't get any response from you, I'll take 3 minutes every single council meeting as long as I'm alive to address this issue. Thank you.
So I was glad to hear that reparations are scheduled to be talked about more in February. Don't worry, we'll be here. We will hold the city accountable to that. And I'm really glad to hear that William A. Jardy Jr. is going to be involved in this. He's a fantastic scholar and a brilliant man and has a lot of insight to offer on reparations. Remember that in terms of this specific city's process, the first step to reparations is abolition. To abolish the harm that the state continues to perpetrate, and then in addition to that, we can provide direct cash payments and housing to our Black and brown communities that do not have that housing. Let me be clear that until every Black person in Asheville has received past due reparations and every unhoused person in the city is housed, the APD should not be receiving a drop of the $30 million this council has chosen to fund their state violence. We'll be here in February. We'll be checking in. Also, in response to hearing that City Council still wants more information about the Vance Monument, I will remind the Council that the people of Asheville have offered to take down this monument for free. It could be our Berlin Wall. We could all have a piece of it. And then you could take the funds saved there and redistribute them immediately to the marginalized people of Asheville. Simple solution. And if Councilperson Kilgore is going to try and run down a list of these right-wing talking points, allow me to double down on one point in particular. She acknowledged that the voices of Black community are not homogenous. That is correct. In the same way, we acknowledge that singular activists in Asheville do not speak for any community as a whole, neither does any council person. We do not pretend to have authority over the people of Asheville, but nor should any council person, mayor, or cop. It is the voice of the people of Asheville that should be heard as a whole. As part of that collective voice, is the voice of Jerry Williams being heard here? No. Has this council honored the demands of his family yet? No. Councilperson Kilgore is correct that the voices of the Black community are not being equitably heard here. That is true. Because of the very nature of this colonizer government, it is ignoring the voices that are trying to be heard by this council. There are organizations that exist to represent the Black community, Black Asheville Demands, the Racial Justice Coalition, but not this city council and not real estate agents. Thousands of people took to the streets this summer. Did the city hear them? No. The city used poison gas, grenades, bullets, and armored vehicles to suppress their voices. They tried to beat the marginalized people of the city into going away. Not only has the city not taken any accountability for that, Chief Sack has not yet been fired. He has not been put on trial for his war crimes. The same goes for every single pig working under him. Dismantle the police now, abolish the police now, and use that $30 million to fund reparations immediately. We'll be here in February.
Our next caller is Abby from North Asheville.
Hey y'all, this is Abby. I've been following city council meetings for a while now. Definitely echo a lot of Greenleaf's points. While your police department tear gassed children and stabbed water bottles at Meta tents, murdered Jerry Williams, continues to terrorize Black and brown folks consistently. Y'all let hotels and restaurants open in a deadly pandemic. You've turned the other way and then said you want community input. We want you to stop being a part of taking the lives of the people who live here, to prioritize the thriving and the well-being of Black and brown people. More and more people get sick and lose their lives due to COVID each week in this community, and rents have not been frozen. We've been in this horrific pandemic for almost a year now, and you are able to sit on these Zoom meetings, and people cannot feed their families in this town. Asheville was able to fill more hotel rooms than any other year this past fall. You all create another task force. People are dying. You drag out this process of whether you will remove a racist monument. You say you need to gather more information when the people like Black Asheville Demands, Racial Justice Coalition, people have taken it to the streets, have called into city council, and you still say you need more information. Again, yeah, let us take it down for free, save your money, invest back into the Black community with that money. Meanwhile, people lose their jobs, their healthcare, their homes in this town. And I will say it will never be a unity park when y'all slash reparations and delay this process of reparations, which I'm excited is on the agenda for February. Asheville used as a headline to generate more tourism while people are dying during this deadly pandemic. When y'all fund APD with new weapons instead of investing in the community, when civilians, unarmed civilians, were tear gassed and shot at, when police continue to murder and terrorize Black and brown folks, there is no unity. Asheville has the largest budget for policing in the state of North Carolina, and this is a small town. There is no unity here. And maybe we don't want to be unified with that kind of lack of morality that comes from a city council. When we are in a housing crisis, when our hospitals are full of COVID patients, when you had shutting off people's water on the table during the pandemic, when you make it near impossible to make a public comment. I'll go on vacation and people are dying. You say you don't have the money for COVID relief or reparations, but have $10 million in a rainy day fund. Have a huge police budget. Defund Asheville Police Department by 50%. Mayor Esther, Deborah Campbell, and anyone else going against the task force's recommendations to remove bans should resign. Quit your job. Stop putting profit over people's lives. Stop dragging your feet. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Josh Katz from West Asheville.
Hey y'all. Yeah, I'm honestly, I'm at a loss for words. I'm confused about why you decided to gather a task force, do research for, 12 weeks, maybe longer, and then they give you their final recommendation after, listening to thousands of people's comments. They spent hours and hours, and you all just decide you need even more information. I mean, the community has already spoken. And, to the people who saying, oh, we don't have the budget, where are we going to get the money from? The way I look at it, so I'm Jewish. My family fled the Nazis. They were able to make it over to America. Whenever I see the Confederate flag or Confederate monument, I imagine, what if that was a monument to an SS officer? What if that was the Nazi flag? I think if that were the case, you guys wouldn't be hesitant at all in removing that. So why are you so indifferent about removing this monument? I just don't get it. And as to the Civil Services Board, that is there to protect police officers. It does not hold them accountable to any of their actions. It's antiquated. As part of reparations, it should be abolished. Thank you for your time.
Hey everyone, my name's Rebecca and I am from Asheville. And I just have a couple of things to say, mostly regarding the Vance Monument. I just wanted to first thank Councilmember Kilgore for reminding us that Black people aren't a monolith. I think that's a very good point and one that we forget a lot of the time. So thank you for reminding us that that is a truth, and thank you for sharing your truth. I do disagree with the idea that you brought up that removing the Vance Monument is an attempt to erase history. I don't think that is it at all. I feel like it has to do with who we glorify and who we keep monuments dedicated to. I know in Germany they've removed statues, monuments, symbols of Nazism, and they definitely haven't forgotten that history. So I just disagree with that point. But I do think that you brought up a good point about the cost of what it would take to remove the monument. And I like your proposal for money going into the Black community, but I would worry that not only would the statue not be removed, but that money would not go into the community, especially when it hasn't been budgeted for such. I do still think that the monument should be taken down, but if it's not taken down, I would like to see money taken from APD, as many of us from the public have called for the defunding of APD, to go into creating connections with the community, assessing needs, working with groups like ones that have been mentioned, like RJC, and groups who have already made those community connections. I also am a little bit worried. I missed a little bit of the beginning of the data committee. I'm not sure if it's committee, but that group that's going to be tasked with looking at outcome or creating outcomes and looking at ways to reach those goals and all that stuff. And the gentleman talked about numbers a lot, like looking at that data. And I just want to say I have a worry that we would be putting too much stock into the numbers and not enough stock into listening to community members. So I do want to encourage everyone on the council to remember that numbers can be very helpful, but they can also not include a lot of the people out there. So thank you. Have a good night.
Council, our next caller is Miranda Norland from Asheville.
Hey, Council, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Firstly, thank you for your time. I'm calling just to kind of agree with a lot of what the past three speakers have said, and just out of concern for the fact that maybe y'all think that we don't really care and we're not paying attention. And so just wanted to call and check in and remind y'all that we do care and we are paying attention. I'm strongly in support of the Vance Monument's removal. I echo the confusion of having a task force led by some brilliant people, participated in by a wide range of folks who did some really deep work, and then not using that, not listening to that. And to the kind of idea of whether there's enough money for removing it and caring for community, like, I don't feel like the Black community or like the Asheville community of people who live here full time, but especially the Black community, should have to choose between whether money goes towards removing a racist statue or a racist monument, or to like making sure people are fed and housed and safe. Like, that's a false binary that has been created and thrust upon us. And I just think it's false. Like, there's plenty of money in the police budget. Like, let's take it from there. There's plenty of money going to advertise for tourism to draw all of these people to bring COVID to our town. How about we get some money from there? And so just really questioning that choice that feels like a false choice. I also, kind of on the topic of reparations, wanted to just weigh in again that is important, and mention to maybe council, but maybe to other people in our community listening, you may know already that there's a Reparations Now toolkit from the Movement for Black Lives that I found really helpful to kind of lay out some definitions. And the first one, so the UN actually defines reparations as 5 things, but the first one is cessation, assurances, and guarantees of non-repetition. And so I think that's what I heard one of the earlier callers just or say in when he started out by saying, like, abolition is the first thing. And so cessation of the harm that the city of Asheville is perpetrating on its residents is the first step, and then assurances of non-repetition, and then continuing on to those other steps. So just encourage council members, if you haven't seen that or others listening to check that out as maybe a place to start as we dig deeper with where we're going. Thank you for your time.
Hey y'all, this is Melanie Noyes. I'm a new member of the Human Relations Commission. I'm looking forward to this new opportunity in holding the city accountable to the demands of the public, which seem to be falling on deaf ears. Tonight I'm asking you to remove the Vance Monument and to suggest to any city staff who are rejecting the recommendation of the task force to resign. We have used all avenues provided to communicate with you on how to use your positions of power to serve. And then you voted 6-1 on accepting the recommendation to take it down. And yet, you not only continue to delay tangible reparations, but Deborah Campbell pandered to right-wing businesses and told them on record that Vance might not be removed. When the mayor is asked about what the city council vote even meant, she said, "That is a good question. So what do these committees, commissions, 30, 60, 90-day plans, task forces, and arguably city staff positions even mean if our participation means nothing to you? You don't need more data to learn what the community needs. You just need to listen." Sweeping the needs and demands of our BIPOC and working class community under the rug isn't just disrespectful, it's dangerous. Because of your refusal to keep us safe from tourism, COVID cases and deaths have skyrocketed. 20% of these cases are from our Latinx residents, despite us making up only 5% of the population here. So keep in mind the decisions you make are also personal. It would be wise of you to reimpose the indoor dining restrictions that you just lifted, especially now that we know the newer, more infectious strain of COVID has reached Charlotte, which means it's likely already here. It was completely reckless of you to lift those restrictions considering, and further shows who you accept to be expendable in order to maintain business as usual. But I digress. Removing Vance Monument is an easy job in the long list of things we need to do to make this a more equitable town. It's been high on the list of Black Asheville demands, which centers our Black community. They are not just, quote, on the radar, as Sandra said earlier. And if anyone on city council actually sat through all of the task force input meetings, you would have heard the logical process on how they arrived at removal. It was erected in the name of white supremacy. Stop wasting our time. Baltimore was able to take down a Confederate statue for less than 20 grand. We've already spent 8 grand more than this just to keep a broken shroud around it. And I'll echo what we've been saying for 9 months now. Defunding APD is where we start when it comes to funding reparations. Hold on. Defunding APD is reparations. You must remove the Vance Monument. It's literally the least you could do. And if you can't do that, then please remove yourself. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Victoria from Asheville.
Hi, City Council. My name's Victoria. I live in South Asheville. First thing I would like to say is I am just appalled by the fact that, say, when COVID started, we developed so many community care projects like Asheville Survival Program, which has fed over 10,000 different grocery deliveries to people around our community here. It is appalling to me that us, as the local individuals that are organizing together by our bootstraps, have done more for this community in the past year than you guys have even talked about doing. I'm like just amazed by this. And I'll echo what everyone else said. The monument needs to go. I don't know what more information that you guys need. I think the information is clear. Black Asheville has made it clear. RJC has made it clear. The people of the city have made it clear. All the signs and demonstrations for the past year have made it clear. I think it's obvious that it needs to go, and we don't care about the cost. Like somebody else said, we'll take it down for you. We've seen it happen. It's not that hard to do. Also, we don't care about the cost of what you want to replace it with. We don't care if there's nothing there for a good year or two. We don't care if we raise the funds ourselves to get an artist to replace it. We don't care. Literally just get rid of it. And on top of that, that leads right into reparations. I'm glad that you guys will be continuing the conversation on reparations, but again, just like everything else that I have listened to tonight and every other city council meeting since June, I'm just hearing this over and over and over again with the same words and no action. I just hear all this bull crap, and I just would like to see it happen. I'm tired of listening to this. You guys have got to be tired of listening to us. Defund the police and put the first step in towards reparations. And like the person before me just said, defunding APD is a great step to reparations. Not even putting money in their hands, literally just getting our safety under control. On top of that, the last thing that I will mention is the dining restrictions that I found out about today. I am so confused as to why earlier this week we find out that we have this super coronavirus in North Carolina, in Charlotte, 2 hours away, and now you guys are going to relax on this again? I am baffled. The cases have not been going down. The death rate has not been going down. Why are you stepping back now? Again, I will close by saying our community, the people that are talking to you right now, us organizers, we have done more for this community in the past year than you guys have probably done in the past decade. Please, God, step it up and do your job.
Council, our next caller is Nettie Fisher.
Hi, my name is Nettie. I live in West Asheville. I'm calling to echo again a lot of the sentiments around the frustration with the advance removal process. Though the Black experience is not a monolith, and I'm not a person of color, I do want to reflect some of the sentiments of people that I've talked to that have said that the repercussion you've talked about of leaving up the monument is that we're continuing to perpetuate and uphold a symbol of oppression. The repercussion is that the city is continuing to uphold the trauma that's been inflicted against Black and Brown people in our community. The community is here to support the city through any repercussions that come up. We're urging you to find a creative solution to make this happen. It's not a time for us to shy away from change, no matter how hard it is. We're urging you to be brave for our community and know that we are here to be brave with you. We need to face the trauma that we've inflicted as a community and that we're continuing to inflict. And we need to have these conversations about how we're going to heal from it. That's what the task force was supposed to be. We went through the process, and now here we are, and we're still having to call and say the same things over and over again. This dysfunction is systemic racism. We're experiencing it firsthand. Our city government as an institution is unintentionally perpetuating these harms through this confusing and misleading process. So we're calling you to say again, we won't stand for it, and we'll keep calling as much as we have to, but we need you to know that this needs to happen, and we have your backs to do whatever it takes. So please listen, please be brave, and know that ignoring what we're saying and taking passive action is not an option. Thank you for your time.
Council, our next caller is Paul Schulman from West Asheville.
Yes, good evening. This is Paul Schulman from West Asheville. A Vance Monument Task Force was created, and citizens were encouraged to apply so that they could represent the community and have their voices heard. Essentially, being as generous as I can be in my perspective of it, a model of what democracy should look like. From a slightly more pessimistic and dare I say likely true perspective, this was a delay tactic in the city to ignore the overwhelming support from Asheville led by Black residents to remove the Vance Monument. They did a very significant amount of work, presented their findings to you with a very generous reception and acknowledgement of the hard work done. And now, in what is to me an exercise in gaslighting, their suggestions are being sidelined because of costs, undermining any semblance of true democracy. There's a mystifying obsession with the budget right now. Over the past several months, the community offered up a great opportunity for the city to recoup a significant amount of money by lowering the police budget. Instead, City Council ignored those calls and chose to continue emptying its funds into an already overfunded police force. And then, as if to rub salt in the wound, you voted to approve the purchase of new weaponry for them to, well, do what police do with weaponry. I'll let you think about what those rifles you approved will be used for. Since we're talking about money, our very own county is opting to hand over $26 million to a weapons manufacturer. There's a common thread here, which surely could have been used to remove the Vance Monument and invest in our local Black community. I first want to thank Congresswomen Roney and Turner for voting no on unfinished business item D. And also, I so deeply hope that it is not Amazon. It surely sounds like it, and the Citizen Times also thinks so. And if this is Amazon, I will be simultaneously infuriated and not at all surprised if you all decide to welcome them in on a red carpet with tax breaks using our money that you're claiming can't be spent in alignment with the community task force's desires. The message that I'm hearing loud and clear from this series of events is that Asheville residents shouldn't waste their time accepting invitations by City Council to do hours upon hours of research to present a comprehensive project publicly, because they'll just be ignored by our elected council people. Fortunately, that won't stop me from calling into every meeting, and I truly hope it doesn't stop others either. And for those listening in on this council meeting, we need to support each other because the city's not supporting those in need. If you can pay your rent or mortgage and have food on your table, please join us in a mutual aid project to distribute stimulus money to our neighbors who are in need. You can Venmo AVL Stimulus Fund, and any questions can be directed to Sunrise Asheville. Thank you.
I would like, okay, great. Wondering, what exactly the point of the Vance Monument Task Force was? Were you just hoping that they might tell you that you didn't have to take it down? Because if so, you should have put more effort into choosing people for it that you knew and trusted to speak for your interests. Unfortunately for you, it ended up being a task force composed of mostly Black Asheville residents who actually were interested in what the public thought about the monument. And so, having attended a couple of the meetings, I saw a huge amount of research go in, and a lot of public input, not as much as I would have liked, but there really never is there? And of course, the conclusion they came to was that it needed to be taken down. So, like all of the other callers, I'm not really sure what more information you need. I feel for you, Councilwoman Kilgore. I wish you would have been on that committee so that you could have given that killer speech to them, but you weren't, and you can't just overturn everything that happened. Now that you're a council person, as you said, the Black voice is not a monolith, and no single person can speak for them. I love your idea of getting more public input from purposefully and directly from Black residents of Asheville. I think that that is a great thing that could be used to determine how much money should be taken from the police force. That's something that we haven't yet had a task force ask the Black residents of Asheville about. So I would commend you to get to do that as soon as possible so that we can find out how much money we're saving for these reparations, right? Because saying that we need to choose between reparations and taking down the Vance Monument is kind of weird, because taking down the Vance Monument is reparations, right? Just like abolition of the police is reparations. Abolition of the prison industrial complex is reparations. Abolition of the military industrial complex is reparations. So I would love to see that happening. I think that it's important to note that Racial Justice Coalition, the group that was integral in the Reparations Resolution, has publicly stated that defunding Asheville Police is reparations. Removing the Vance Monument is reparations. And I am also concerned that, oh, that's it?
Council, our next caller is Laura Lustig from West Asheville. Laura, your line is now open.
Hey, this is Lara Lustig. I'm a former teacher. I also have 3 kids at Asheville City Schools, 1 at the high school, and 2 who have been thriving since they were 3 years old at Asheville Primary School. I'm coming to you tonight with some serious concerns about the recent actions of the Asheville City Schools Board of Education to vacate the Asheville Primary School building in order to liquidate it, displacing both Montessori school and excellent Asheville preschool program without any clear transition plan to support these exceptional classrooms, the teachers, and the students. These are short-sighted decisions. They've been made quickly, opaquely, during a global pandemic, and without meaningful input of staff, families, or community stakeholders. This same board just rescheduled their meeting for next Monday from the regular evening time to 1:30 in the afternoon, making it virtually impossible for any teachers to attend and making it extremely difficult for parents who are both working and remote schooling our children to even watch via Zoom or make public comments, because at these meetings, public comment is only accepted in person, raising another unnecessary and dangerous barrier to community participation. As the body that appoints the members of the school board, I come before you to ask that you hold this board responsible for their actions. Mayor, at the last round of board appointments in 2019, you asked candidates for reappointment, what are you doing to engage parents, faculty, students on the front end before decisions are made? 2 years later, that question remains unanswered. We need transparency, accountability, and engagement, meaningful stakeholder engagement, not more of the same. The good news is that you are going to have applications from excellent, experienced, diverse, dedicated new candidates for school board who are committed to asking hard questions and soliciting community participation to put students first and find the best way forward for Asheville City Schools. Please use an in-depth essay and interview process to determine who is best suited to hold the vision and lead ACS to be the successful, equitable district that it can be for all of our kids. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Donna Brown.
Hello, my name is Donna Brown. I live in Arden. I am calling as a concerned citizen. I'm a new citizen. I moved here in 2019 from South Carolina. And I was going to say something, but I heard that Dr. Darity was mentioned, and Dr. Darity is an expert on reparations. I'm sure he's already told you that reparations means to repair the damage that has been done to the Black community, African American, American descendants of slavery, over a 400+ year period. Now, my thing is, what the wording of your resolution includes minorities. You start out talking about American descendants of slavery, and as you go through the resolution, it talks about minorities. Minorities include everybody that's not identified as white, and that includes people that are LGBTQ. It also includes white women. So I would like that you would change the wording from minority in the resolution to American descendants of slavery. And the other point of it was, let me think, it was so many callers, and thank you callers if you're still on the line, because you guys are just on fire for reparations for American descendants of slavery. I appreciate that. And you've basically taken some of the points that I was going to talk about. But the one thing that I want to stress, I'm 62 years old, and I am a student of desegregated schools. I was in a desegregated school from 66 to 71, 1966 to 71. Most black immigrants didn't come to the country until 1963. But I noticed anywhere you find online talking about reparations is authored by a black immigrant from some other country who wasn't on this ground. They wasn't on this soil in 1963. So I have a problem with that, but that's not your concern. And the other thing about the Vance Monument, I can tell you, that's not going to put food on my table if you take it down. That is not, to me, that is not reparations. Reparations to me is something that I can feel. We need to be a protected status from being killed in this country, in the street. We need to be a protected status for that, from that. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Shifra Allers from Asheville.
Hi, my name is Shifra Allers, and my husband and I have lived in Asheville for over 20 years, and we have 6 children, and we're business owners in downtown. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the Asheville City School Board and Asheville Primary School. I represent the stakeholders from Asheville Primary who have all voiced similar concerns, but our pleas have thus far fallen on deaf ears. We have 2,500 signatures on a change.org petition, and we deserve to be heard. Asheville Primary is the only 5-star public preschool and the only public Montessori program in the region. It must continue. We've already spent the money on Montessori materials and education. 100 years of Montessori education worldwide proves that it works, and there's over 500 public Montessoris in the U.S. alone. If Asheville wants to be a leader, we need to look at what makes us different, what makes us special. Asheville Primary is definitely one of those things. Diverse, inclusive, accessible, and teaching anti-racism and love and respect for all. Separating the preschool classes into various elementary schools as is planned is absurd. The teachers benefit from their collective experience working together. In effect, closing these 2 highly regarded programs, you're going to demonstrate that the city doesn't care about lower income families that currently have access to these amazing resources, and they will cease to exist in the next school year. That's shameful. This meeting has been discussing millions of dollars being spent. Spend it where it matters. Spend it on the kids that are going to change the world. The parents, teachers, and staff of Asheville Primary are shocked, frustrated, and furious that the school is closing. We regularly hear the term blindsided when we ask people how they feel. This is not the way a board that represents the community operates. Asheville takes education seriously, and our kids deserve the best. The lack of communication and transparency from the school board is not acceptable. I have attended the last several school board meetings. There's been no opportunity for public comment even when we've requested it. We do not receive responses to emails. However, the mayor is able to find time to respond to emails. And now the board has decided to move the time of the board meeting to midday, further dismissing the request from the teachers to be able to present their positions. Since the school board is unable and unwilling to communicate with the very families and teachers it is supposed to represent, a complete overhaul is needed. I urge you to replace the individuals that don't want to talk to their constituents, whether they're elected or appointed positions. Holding an office on behalf of the public is a privilege and a responsibility. We need to get the right people in place. Let's find people who understand the past and believe in the future of our beloved city. Selling the Asheville Primary Campus at the corner of 240 and Haywood Road in West Asheville to the highest bidder is egregious. I urge City Council to rethink this horrendous decision. Thank you for your time. I do appreciate it. Our issues are not.
Our next caller is Galen Wilcox. Galen, I'm going to open your line. You won't be prompted.
Okay, thank you. Can anybody hear me? Everybody?
Hear you.
So, my name is Galen Wilcox. I live at 63 Hornot Circle in Asheville, which is adjacent to the new
Bluffs on River Bend project proposed for a 92-acre parcel in Woodfin that sits on this side of the river between the Richmond Hill neighborhood, the French Broad River, and Richmond Hill Park. It's a gigantic project with gigantic impacts, all of which will fall on Asheville. Woodfin will reap whatever benefits there are. Basically, the project, for those of you who may not know it, consists of 1,545 luxury apartments. That's 7 5-story apartment buildings in this 92-acre parcel on the river next to Richmond Hill Park. So it will drain into the river and Richmond Hill Park, and the traffic impacts will be considerable. I'm not going to beat you all to death with this, considering the night you've had. But what I do request is that the city council authorize the city attorney to seek standing to oppose this proposal so that Asheville can get in the game. Considering the impacts to Asheville, I would think Asheville would want to get in the game. And that the staff and the city council authorize the staff to authorize all staff to assist the city attorney in opposing the development. Thank you for your time.
Council, our next caller is Autumn Pittman from Richmond Hill.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm going to follow up on what Galen was talking about regarding the proposed development in the Richmond Hill community. I know it's kind of come to the forefront of discussion a lot recently, and I know it's a sort of tricky situation for the Richmond Hill community and for you all as well, because of the location being what it is next to Richmond Hill Park, adjacent to the Richmond Hill community, which is Asheville, and then the French Broad River, and it not being contiguous with town of Woodfin. So the big discussion is, where does Asheville stand in relation to the community members that oppose this development so strongly, and the impact that it will have and the significant burden that will be placed upon this community and this neighborhood, park, and infrastructure that is already in disrepair to a certain extent. Especially the road leading up from Pearson Bridge to Richmond Hill Park. It is heavily traveled. The greater influx already in relation to the bike park that has just gone in, the hiking trails, the disc golf, everything. It's a well-loved park, and the traffic is significant. But in addition to that, the environmental impact of this development and what that means for the city of Asheville and the community at large, as a town that it prides itself on sustainability and lessening our carbon footprint, allowing these kinds of developments to come in sort of unchecked, as it were, regardless of the jurisdiction in which the proposal is being placed, there needs to be some sort of, reciprocity in relation to the jurisdictions and how these developments will impact each other. We have the county, we've got the city, we've got Woodfin, and here we are over here, Richmond Hill, where all three of these worlds are kind of colliding on this proposal. And it's like, what is going to be done to make sure that the greater good of our community is going to be cared for? This is not something that should be taken lightly or passively, especially as we're in a time of climate change and crisis. The French Broad River is already pretty degraded, and a development like this would only degrade it further. And I don't think that there's any argument against that. And so it's like, what is Asheville going to do to stand up with the community that strongly supports environmental impact studies and understanding those things before developments like this can be implemented? And we're just asking that you really hear our voices and you get involved in this discussion and what influence that can have on ensuring that the health and well-being of the community at large is being cared for. I know we need housing and things of that nature, but there are smart ways to do it. And I hope that you guys will really consider your role in this. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Renee Squire.
Thank you. My name is Renee Squire, a long-term resident of East Asheville. I grew up in Asheville and remember when downtown was small and not safe. Huge strides occurred in the 90s, and today we have a thriving downtown. Obviously, with COVID, that's had a major impact. Of recent, the homeless issue is growing in our city and should be addressed by the city council. It affects our safety of our citizens, the safety of the homeless members, and our local economy. My 20-year-old daughter works downtown in a restaurant, and one of her host responsibilities was to stop the homeless from entering the restaurant and engaging with patrons, a job she was not really trained for at 20. She also had to park a distance from the restaurant and walk at night to her car. A couple of times was harassed by a homeless man. Needless to say, she no longer works at the restaurant. And I'm sure the restaurant owner will continue to struggle to hire and employ employees during this time. I find myself, having been downtown, going to restaurants, taking takeout and being asked for leftovers or asked for money while I'm downtown. It's not as safe as it used to be, and it's sad. Just recently, a man was stabbed in the leg by a homeless person when he was trying to get assistance. Also, my neighborhood has had several cars broken into. They've stolen pocket knives and money, not even taking electronics that are sitting out in the open. Our homeless community needs our help. I was approached by a homeless woman in the parking lot of Target on Tunnel Road, and she asked me if I could get her a tent because she's just gotten out of an abusive relationship. This is the middle of winter, and all she's saying is she needs a tent. I think the community should provide more for her. I can't imagine the crime that must be happening in these tent cities that are popping up all over town. We should be helping our homeless get off the streets and out of these tents. They should not be allowed to panhandle like traffic signals or sleep outside. Hopefully there is something we can do. I'm not an expert and I don't have the answers, but I hope City Council can find some citizens or community engagement resources within our community to address the problem. Help these people get into shelters where they can be warm, fed, and get the assistance they need. I do believe our economy depends on it. I'd like to hear the city's council plans to help the homeless get off the street and out of the tents. They need our assistance, definitely. Thank you.
Good evening, council members and diligent members of the voting public. My name is Corinne, and I am a citizen of West Asheville. As we all know, we've been in the midst of a global pandemic. Sorry, I'm trying not to cry. My husband's immune suppressed, and we haven't been able to leave our house in the past 10 months. It's extremely disheartening to see that the city claims to possess millions of dollars in rainy day funds, and instead of providing those funds to the businesses and residents that need them the most, you kept our doors wide open to swaths of tourists. This undoubtedly has raised the infection rates here and forced businesses to put their employees' lives at risk to serve out-of-towners brunch. How important. This paints the picture that this council and our city government cares more about tourist dollars than they do about the people that make this city great. Without us, there is no Asheville. Without our businesses, there's no Asheville. I urge you to release the rainy day funds for immediate relief. Speaking of money, it's very disheartening to hear just waiting months and months, going through the whole Vance Monument Task Force situation, hearing that the vote was, in fact, to remove the Vance Monument, seeing the city spend $28,000 to shroud this monument, which, by the way, was not a demand listed on blackashevilledemands.org. However, removing the monument is still listed there and has been listed there. I urge you to listen to the people. The people have spoken. We want the monument removed. We don't care what goes there. We want the monument removed. Furthermore, a $770,000 cut, a $770,000 cut to the Asheville Police Department budget is not enough. We want 50% cut. It's laughable that you're saying we're putting $50,000 towards a high-speed wireless program when we spent $28,000 just on a shroud for the monument. This is not enough money. Our police budget is extremely high for how small of a city Asheville is, the highest in the state. Why are we spending $30 million to supply our police force with war-grade weapons, which were used on our public, on our constituents, on the people of Asheville who were just peacefully protesting racial injustice? We made national news with photos of cops gassing peaceful protesters and children, destroying medical stations. We witnessed video of the assaulting of Johnny Rush and the murder.
Council, I'm going to try to bring Callie Warner back into the queue.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, technical things. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Thank you for listening. I am not an anti-developer. I'm a native of Asheville. My mother sold real estate with preferred properties for 50 years. I'm also not an NIMBY because the proposed Bluffs on Riverbend is not located near me. I am a proponent of smart development and helped launch Grow Wise Buncombe to empower citizens and hopefully direct our elected officials in Woodson, Buncombe County, and Asheville towards sustainable practices. Understanding that City Council can't vote on the approval or denial of the Bluffs on Riverbend, you are able to authorize the city attorney to seek standing to oppose the Bluffs development. There is no question that the development will adversely impact the city's infrastructure, thereby increasing Asheville's residents' property taxes. Increasing vehicle traffic to approximately 6,000 more cars a day is not only extremely dangerous on these country roads, but we will be paying for its upkeep, not Woodson. Joining Richmond Hill and River Rescue as a unified opposing body is essential and a step every citizen is counting on our city council and attorney to do. Richmond Hill Road is already stressed, thanks to the fabulous park our city taxpayers funded for improvements. Adding 4,000 Woodson neighbors who are surely going to use the park will fall on Asheville City residents to pay for that extra burden on its infrastructure. Our property taxes help fund the future waves, the Riverlink Park, and the extended bike lanes. Creating this kind of outdoor living in a time when COVID is morphing into many strains we haven't a handle on is where I want my tax dollars to go. Not office space or retail or high-end apartments with no affordable housing. And I certainly don't want to see the future river amenities flooded by or sediment and ruined by it. At what cost is that to us? We can't keep building bridges over our river, resulting in runoff pollutants. We can't look at its steep slopes as locations for future medium-sized towns to sprawl across. Once water and sewer reach the bluffs from the future bridge, there is no legal way to prevent contiguous landowners north towards Marshall to tap into it. And once that happens, the future energy burden, runoff, and flooding will surely increase Asheville's property taxes again. It's concerning to all residents that the legal criterion has historically allowed the withholding of notification to nearby residents, typically until just days before, with only one public hearing granted for citizen comment on large-scale proposals. This process is offensive to us and disempowering. All we ask is that you include us at the get-go and incorporate a legal transparency requirement in the city ordinances. We want to feel heard, and we are tired of city expression. In closing, my heart, I ask City Council to authorize the city attorney to seek stand.
In council, that was our last caller for the night.
Council, that concludes our meeting this evening. And we will be meeting again in,
Esther,
yep, mhm.
is there time for me to say something?
Sure.
So this is Kim speaking. With the overlapping crises of the COVID-19 pandemic, economic instability, systemic racism, and the city of Asheville's own stated climate emergency, with the exception of item G on the consent agenda regarding the FEMA funding for our homeless neighbors, I just have to personally acknowledge that a business as usual meeting like this one is going to sting. Additionally, I wanted to let our neighbors know that I hear my students and friends and neighbors calling urgently for a request for LGBTQ inclusive non-discrimination ordinances for protection of human and civil rights. We are working on this. I'm working on this. We're going to need to collaborate with the county and build coalition across the state. And I just urge folks to please stay engaged and keep pushing for meaningful action. So that's all for tonight.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else, anyone else have any comments or announcements or anything like that before we adjourn? Okay. Okay, council, we are adjourned.